Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today. So my plan today, we have a really busy day ahead of us, is to put together some convenience meals. So if you've been with me over the last couple of months, you know that I have been doing a ton of canning and a ton of putting up meals in jars, things like this, which is a cobbler mix, which we're going to make today. Things like chili base here to put together a really easy chili, and things like peaches to add to our cobbler, canned beans, all that kind of stuff. And the reason that I put so much work into getting all of these products on my pantry shelves is so that I can take it a little bit easier in the wintertime and have some opportunities to put together some really quick home-cooked meals on busy days like today without having to take a ton of time in the kitchen. So I'm anticipating putting all of this food together, including a couple loaves of bread, which I'm going to make, and I'm going to walk you through my simple bread recipe in a few minutes. But I think it's probably going to take a total of maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So this is going to include a main course, it's going to include some bread, and a dessert as well. So it is possible to be a from-scratch cook and still have convenience meals like this. So we're gonna start with making the bread, and this is the simple bread recipe out of my cookbook, and this is available for pre-sale until the 5th of November, so just a couple more days. And we're gonna be shipping these out at the end of November, so you'll have them in time for Christmas. I'm really excited about this cookbook. We put a lot of work into it. But this recipe that is in here for bread, if you have never made bread before, this is the recipe for you. It is very easy to do, and I'm gonna walk you through all the steps to put it together, and this will make 3 good size loaves of bread. I'll bring you over to the other side of the kitchen and we'll jump right into it. This mixer is called an Ankerstrom, and I replaced my old KitchenAid that I'd had for years and years and years that finally bit the dust about 9 months ago or so, and I love this mixer. I got this one from Juicerville, and I think I have a $25 code for this. If I do, I'll put it down in the show notes for you. One thing I will say about it is it was a little bit of a learning curve to learn how to use this machine because it functions quite differently than any other mixer that I've used before. But now that I have learned how to use it, I absolutely love it. And these machines have been around for a really long time. It's a Swiss-made machine, and I've heard of people that have had theirs for over 50 years. So I'm hoping that this is going to last me the rest of my life. This is how, here, I'll take this off and show you. It has this part here, and this attaches on right here, and this is what kneads the bread. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then there's a scraper on this side to keep the dough scraped off the side of the machine. So the first thing that we're gonna do is add 4 cups of warm water. Make sure that your water is not too hot because you don't wanna kill your yeast. We're going to add 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast into our water. And we're going to add a 1/4 cup of oil. And I like to put my oil in my measuring cup first. We're also going to add a 1/4 cup of honey, but it just helps the honey come out of the measuring cup more easily. So a 1/4 cup of honey as well. And the honey sweetens the bread a little bit, but it also feeds the yeast and causes the yeast to rise. So I'm going to make this probably around, I don't know, a 30% whole wheat, but I'm using a stone ground whole wheat flour, which gives it more of like a 60% wheat flavor. Can you see how easily that comes out because the oil was in there? With bread making, it's usually recommended to leave your yeast, your water, and your sugar, whatever kind of sweetener that you're using, for around 10 minutes to activate your yeast. I almost never do that. I usually just throw everything in and get it mixing. The one reason that you might want to do that for sure is if you're in doubt that your yeast is actually active, because you'll be able to tell really quickly if it's active because it'll start getting foamy in your bowl. I'm not worried about that. I know my yeast is active, so I'm just gonna throw everything in here. So we already have our honey, our oil, our water, and our yeast. Now we're going to add 2 cups of stone ground flour. This recipe is really flexible, so you can adjust. You could do all white flour if you want. You could do all whole wheat flour if you want. The only thing that I will say about adjusting bread recipes as far as the kinds of flours you use is that whole wheat flour tends to absorb more water than other than white flour will, straight up white flour. So you might need to adjust the amount of flour that you add to the recipe just so that it's the right consistency. But I'll show you what consistency we're going for in a minute. So I'm going to add a couple of cups of this all-purpose flour, and I get my flour from a place called True Grain here in British Columbia, and it is BC grown organic wheat. It's a really good flour. I've been using it for a few years. So I'm going to set this on low, and this has a timer on it, so I'm going to turn it to 8 minutes. Usually with kneading in a mixer, you want to cut down, like when I was using a KitchenAid mixer, you want to cut down on the amount of kneading time because it does such a good job of it. But I find that the Ankerstrom mixer acts much more like hand kneading does. So the 8 minutes for both mixing and kneading seems to work really well. So we're just going to mix everything together right now and then start to add our flour. So this recipe calls for around 6 to 8 cups, and the reason that I put 6 to 8 cups in there is for the reason that I was saying earlier, that you'll need to adjust the amount of flour depending on the kind of flour that you're using for your bread. So now we're just going to start adding flour in, and that's 6 cups. So now at this point, I'll usually just let it mix in really well, and then I'll start watching for the consistency that I'm looking for. So what I'm looking for is to be able to touch the bread, have it be a little bit sticky, but not pull back where there's actually dough left on my finger. So I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. And then for consistency, when it's fully kneaded, we're looking for an elastic texture, so that when we put our finger on it and we push, it kind of bounces back a little bit. I just have my oven preheating at 350 degrees for the cobbler that we're going to make in a few minutes. Okay, so I can tell by looking at that I can add another half a cup of flour or so, and now I can just leave this and let this knead. A couple of days ago, my husband and I put together 72 or 73, and we did do this on our channel, so if you want to check it out, you can look at the video previous to this one, where we put together baking mixes. So we did cobbler, we did muffins, we did breakfast cookies, what else did we do? And pancake mix. And this is just for convenience. So we can open up this jar, add our eggs, our milk, our vanilla that we need to add to this, and then it's ready to go. So I have a baking dish over here, so I'm just going to butter this baking dish quickly. And then into this, you can throw whatever kind of fruit you have on hand. I'm going to do some canned peaches. We're going to pop our jar of peaches open, and this already is canned with a light syrup. So there's a little bit of sugar in here, and we're gonna dump the whole thing, juice and all, right into the bottom of our pan here. And I'm going to go and just quickly cut up these bigger slices of peaches, because these are quartered peaches. So we'll just do slightly smaller sizes. I am going to add a little bit of cinnamon on here. You can do this if you want, or omit it if you like, and then set this aside while we mix up our batter here. So this is a triple recipe that we did in here. So I am going to take, this recipe is also one of the ones from my cookbook. So I'll give you the base recipe for this, and then just remember that mine is tripled. So you'll need half a cup of butter, 2 eggs, 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, and you're going to want to beat that all up, a half a cup of milk, a teaspoon of vanilla, 1 cup of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and then the canned fresh fruit, or fresh fruit of your choice, or frozen fruit if you like. So I'm going to need 1.5 cups of butter, because like I said, this is triple. So I forgot to take butter out of the fridge yesterday. So this is actually frozen butter. So I'm going to melt it, warm it up and melt it a little bit over on the stove. And our mixer is now done. So you can see here how this is a little bit sticky, but it's not sticking to my fingers. And then when I push down, we get some bouncing back happening. You can see that there. So that's what we're looking for. So now we're just going to remove this part and this, take off our extra dough. And the beauty of this is this comes with a lid. I just put this on the lid. I'm gonna set my timer for 1 hour and let this rise until it has doubled in size. So bread making can seem like it's very time consuming because of the rising time, but the actual amount of time, especially if you're using a mixer, that you spend actually putting the bread together is only a few minutes. And if you are kneading it by hand, It's around 8 minutes of hand kneading time, maybe 2 minutes of actually just kind of mixing all the ingredients together on top of that. So even that only takes around 10 minutes, and then it takes less than 5 minutes to form the loaves. So really, it's not a super time-consuming thing. At least a simple recipe like this one isn't. We're going to do 1.5 cups of milk, a couple teaspoons of vanilla, our mix. So I'm just going to mix this together to make sure we incorporate all the baking powder and the salt and the flour and the sugar and everything all together. Add our eggs. So we're going to add our butter. So all we now need to do is dump this on here. We're going to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees for around probably 40 minutes. So with the base recipe, if you're just using a 9x9, it only takes around 20 minutes or so to cook. But because this is a bigger recipe, I'm going to adjust the baking time. And I'm also going to add a little bit of extra cinnamon to the top of this, and also a little bit of sugar, which you can omit if you like. Into the oven. And next up, we have our chili. So this chili base has all the seasonings in it. It has tomato, it has peppers and onions in it, so that you don't need to add any seasoning to this. I'm also going to add a quart of diced tomatoes, which is not necessary, but this will just stretch it out a little bit more. I'm going to add a quart of kidney beans, and I am going to rinse these off. And our beans. I do have some canned corn down in the pantry, but I also have a bunch of frozen corn in the freezer. So I'm going to add probably 1.5 cups to that. Mix it all together. And I could add some canned mushrooms to this. I have some dried mushrooms too, so I think I might add some dry mushrooms as well. So this doesn't need anything else. Now all I have to do is heat this up and it will be ready to eat in 10 minutes. So a fully home-cooked chili that took no time. So in less than 20 minutes, and if I wasn't filming, it probably would have taken me even less time to put together a meal. So this is going to be a main course. I'm going to have the bread to go with the chili, probably add some grated cheese on the top of that. And then I have a dessert in the oven. So of course there's the baking time involved, but the actual time that you have to spend in the kitchen is hardly any at all. And I still get to feed my family a home-cooked meal, and I know exactly what went into all the ingredients. So there's no question that the making of all of these canned products took time. You guys have been with me for the entire journey, from growing the food to canning the food, getting it up into my pantry. So there's no question that that part takes time. But because I can in bulk, so when I did beans, I don't remember, maybe you remember how many jars of beans I did. I think it was 50 to 60 jars of beans or something like that. It took me a couple of days, but now I have those beans ready on the pantry shelf to use for the next 6 months. The same with the canned tomatoes, the same with the chili base. So I do try to reserve these meals for days when I'm really busy like this. On days when I'm not as busy and I have more time to spend in the kitchen, I would make the same chili, but I would just do the whole thing from scratch. So all the chopping and all that kind of stuff that would be involved in it, and it would take a lot more time. But I cannot tell you how much I appreciate being able to throw together a meal like this and kind of get on with my day. One of the other things that I'll add about the way that I do food, especially in the winter time, is I try to do all of my cooking, my baking and everything in the morning, because I'm a morning person and I have most of my energy in the morning, but also my day can just get really busy. And I want to be able to provide good home cooked food for my family, but I know that if I don't get it in the morning, I'm much more likely to want to order pizza, for instance, by 4:30 in the afternoon, or use up some of my convenience food and just put together a quick meal. And so if I get it done in the morning, then we have all that food done and I don't have to think about it again for the rest of the day. And that's been really helpful for me, because while I do really appreciate home cooked food, I love the taste of it, I love being able to serve this to my family, I like a lot of the work that goes into getting to the point of having all this home cooked food, like the raising livestock, growing the garden, all that kind of stuff. But actually cooking is not my favorite thing to do. Because of how important I find food, it's one of the aspects of my job that I do need to do a lot. So I've tried to find ways to make it as easy as possible for me to do it, because it's not something that I really love to do. So that's one of the things about this cookbook that I think you'll find is that it is full of really easy meals to make. It's full of kind of old school recipes, not a lot of fancy ingredients, so things that you can find on any supermarket shelf. And it's done in the spirit of more of inspiration, so that you can alter the recipes to suit what you have in your cupboards that day, your family's taste preferences and things like that. So like I said, it's available for a couple more days. So this video is coming out when? This video is coming out on the 1st. So it'll be available for around 5 more days. The digital copy will continue to be available after that. So we do have a digital copy with a clickable index, and it looks really nice on a computer or a tablet or a phone even. That one will continue to be available, and we are considering holding stock in the new year. There's just some kind of technicalities that we have to work out on the back end in order to be able to do that. But if you do want the cookbook before the 5th, now's your chance to order it, and I'll put a link down in the show notes for you. So I thought what we would do while the food is cooking and the bread is rising is we'll head out to the garden, and I'll give you an update on where our winter prep is at. It is just so beautiful. Oh my gosh, so gorgeous. Okay, so we'll start with up here. This is the potato garden, and we have almost all the beds reformed and most of the weeds taken out. So we have, I think, 1, 2, 3 more beds to do up on the upper part, and then we'll get our hot wire taken down here, and this will be good to go for winter. It's a little bit brisk out here right now, but just still incredibly beautiful for the end of October. I mean, honestly, beautiful for any time of year. It's just gorgeous. So as you can see, the garden still has a few things to clean up, but we're just about there. So this is where I did peas. So I'm going to be taking these trellises out and then getting all the excessive amount of weeds. This one's almost taken care of, but all the rest of the weeds out of here. And I am not going to be growing peas again next year. Peas take up a lot of space in the garden, and they are a ton of work to process them. And it's honestly not worth the effort, in my opinion. I've come to this conclusion a few times over the years, and then I'll go for a few years not growing them, and then I'll decide, I think I'll try again, but I am not going to do them next year. I might even leave these trellises here because I did grow some cucumbers up this year, and that worked really well. So I still have to think about that, but these 2 beds are the last. I think there's one more bed over there, but are the last beds that actually need to be prepped for winter. So that's awesome. I have Egyptian walking onions planted underneath this little piece of weed barrier here. That's to keep the chickens out. Most of the chickens have been put back into the coop, but there's still a few that keep getting out of the coop and getting into the garden. So this is just to protect them from digging those up. I have a couple of pots here and containers that I need to put into the greenhouse over here. The garlic is also covered as well for the same reason, so the chickens don't dig it up. You can see one lone rooster over there. And this has been working really well. They haven't been digging that up. There's another bed right there that needs to get prepped, and then we're going to be able to leave the garden for winter. The other thing that we did over here, like I said when I was talking about the high tunnel when we were last in the garden together, is we have taken off all of the plastic off the high tunnel. So it had torn really badly in a windstorm, and I have decided to use the plastic, which is actually laying here. It needs to get all folded up and put away. But I am going to use that plastic to make row covers for my squash and my pickling cucumbers next year. Our frost dates over the last couple of years have been moving further into June. I used to be able to plant kind of around the end of May, but we've had frost at the end, around the 10th of June for the last 2 years. So in order to get squash, though, I still need to get them in the ground fairly early. So I thought if I built some little row covers to go over them, especially in the early part of the season using this greenhouse film, that would probably protect them well enough from those cold spring temperatures. So that's my plan with this plastic, and then we've ordered new plastic to cover the high tunnel, but we're going to leave it uncovered for winter. Keeping it covered with the greenhouse film dries it out dreadfully over the winter time. So on years when I'm going to be replacing it, I like to leave it uncovered so that the soil stays alive with all its nutrients and its worms and all that kind of stuff and doesn't get killed off through being baked all winter long. So that's the plan. So we'll wait till early spring to cover it back up again. It is a serious mess down there because the chickens have been having a heyday in there. So I have decided to just leave it for the winter and then do all the cleanup on it in the spring. It's just going to involve taking the weed barrier from the pathways up and just giving that a rinse off and laying it back down again, and then reforming the beds a little bit. There's not too much work that I'll need to do. And then we do have the little greenhouse here. Look at that. We still have some pansies blooming in here. Look at that. That's beautiful. What a lovely little surprise. I like to have the little greenhouse all cleaned out this time of year, so that way in the spring when I hit the ground running with all my seeds starting and I have to bring my seedlings out here, I don't have to spend a ton of time cleaning it in preparation for that. So it's pretty much ready to go. I have all my frost blankets all folded up there to bring out in the spring to cover those tender plants with those cold, long, cold springs that we've been having. So I would say we probably have another couple of hours to spend in the garden just getting it finished. So we'll do that over this weekend, and then that'll be it until spring. I was really not ready to let go of the garden this year. I was genuinely quite sad about it when the season was coming to a close, but I feel ready now. I feel ready for the change of the season and the change of the pace. So our bread should just be ready to form into loaves now, so we'll head up to the house and do that. Okay, our bread is ready. You can see the lid is rising up on there. So what we're gonna do here is dump our bread right out onto the counter. And one thing you can do if your house is cool is I was just baking in the oven, and so the top of the stove was warm, so I just stuck this onto the top of the stove, and that helped it to rise even faster because it was nice and warm. And then I'm going to take my bread here and I'm going to form a loaf out of it. So I don't get too carried away when I'm forming my loaves. Just tuck the ends in, give it a bit of a roll, just like so, into a greased bread pan. And we're just going to cover this with a tea towel and set these aside and let those rise for around 45 minutes or so until they're nice and poofy. And our cobbler is all done. So let's cut into this and try it. So there it is. And the way that I like to eat my cobbler is with a little bit of milk. There's nothing more kind of soul food for me than a peach cobbler. Yum, yum. Just delish. And I've already tried the chili, and the chili tastes just perfect. Now I just have to wait for the bread to rise, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's risen, and then we'll pop it in the oven and bake it for around 30 minutes to 35 minutes at 350 degrees until it's nice and golden brown. But I'll show you that when it's all done. All right, friends, our bread is done. Nothing better than warm bread. I can't wait to have a slice. I love that it is possible to have home-cooked meals like this and not spend hours and hours in the kitchen. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.